guys, and welcome back to the Cruel War from the Hungarian Grand Prix. And a couple of things before we begin. Yes, this is a Williams t-shirt. It was when I was a fan, and it was back from the 2014 season, so it was when they were doing okay. So, of course, to kick off the Cruel War, we have the race winner, Lewis Hamilton. And what can we say, really? They looked to be struggling in practice, didn't look to have the pace. They were making a couple of slides and a few errors, a couple of spins as well, of course. And in qualifying, in the tricky conditions, getting slightly and gradually wetter, they full-on benefited. And it was Hamilton that took pole rather convincingly in the end over the Ferraris, especially his teammate just behind him for a Mercedes 1-2. And Hamilton during the race, pretty flawless to be fair, wasn't it? He pulled out at the start. I mean, it was really strange. It's not very often that we see all top four cars off the line just pulling behind each other and not really making much of an effort to pass. It was a really strange start. Everyone just got a good start, but no one got an amazing one. So in the end, Hamilton was led to pull away. Strategy was fairly flawless, and of course he did have the benefit of Bottas holding up the Ferraris for pretty much the entire race as well, but of course we'll come to that. So in terms of Hamilton's race, fairly flawless. In terms of qualifying, again, fairly faultless. You can't diss a pole position, can you? And of course, practice was finding the limits, overstepped the mark a couple of times, but you can't really knock it off for that. At least he didn't stick it in the barriers. So for that reason, Hamilton, of course, flawless weekend, smack bang, on point, pulls us a bit further ahead of the championship as well now, 24 points I believe it is, the biggest it's been all season long in that battle, so I'm going to score him a full 10 points. Full 10 points for Hamilton. Perfect weekend. Good stuff. Next up is, of course, Sebastian Vettel. After qualifying fourth, he stayed there for a little bit, got past his teammate in the first lap on turn 3, and managed to make that stick, and then was stuck behind Bottas for pretty much the rest of it until the final couple of laps, where it all kicked off, didn't it? It all got hot and spicy in the last 10 laps. We thought it was going to be a boring race. It was a race of strategy which made it interesting, but not exactly the most exciting. And then when it came to the final 5-10 laps, it was really, really hotting up and good stuff. And Vettel got second. How he didn't get a puncture, I have no idea. Yes, so it looks as though, of course, that Vettel and the Ferrari team would be having an advantage over Mercedes, especially looking into practice. Qualifying came, and the wet conditions really, really didn't help them, and they lined up behind the Mercedes drivers. Then when it came to the race, they got bottled up behind Bottas. Hamilton was allowed to break clear, and it was only as a result of Vettel finally getting fed up and frustrated. Raikkonen was right behind him as well after taking an additional pit stop, that he tried an audacious move up the inside of turn 1, didn't quite work. We're alongside and round the outside for turn 2, and it's a bit of a 50-50. I don't think anything will be done by it. It is under investigation currently at time of recording, but basically what happened was, you can either see it from two perspectives. Vettel either thought it was clear and came across, or Bottas just locked up that little bit and hit the inside curb on the left-hand side, which of course just slightly tapped him into Vettel, and of course that led to front wing damage for Bottas. How it wasn't a penalty for Vettel, I have no idea. That was lady luck shining upon him there, definitely. I thought that was a puncture and he'd been well down the order, but it wasn't. He bagged P2. My personal opinion on it was a racing incident. It was the last few laps. Vettel had got tired of being bottled up behind Bottas, costing him the win effectively. Or potentially, I should say. We don't know what it was capable, of course. And then it just got to a bit of a head. Bottas was frustrated being left out there on old tyres, so something was going to kick off, and that did happen. So, racing incident for me. I'd slightly lay the blame more on Bottas because Vettel was pretty much a car width ahead, and Bottas just, like I said, caught the inner curb. But racing incident, one of those things. Yeah, Bottas did suffer for it in the end, I suppose, but it wasn't really going to be that detrimental because I think the Ferraris have got past anyway. So for that reason, I'm going to award Vettel a full 8 points. I'm not going to give him a full 10 points because it wasn't a perfect race, and I'm certainly not going to give him 9 points because I don't feel like it. Next up, of course, we have Kimi Raikkonen. After qualifying third, out-qualifying his teammate, of course, it's worth noting. And yeah, he got jumped on in the early start of the race by Vettel to drop him down to fourth. But then from there was pretty much a steady fourth. He was battling with Bottas, but then Ferrari decided to give him an additional pit stop, which prevented him from really gaining anything, or so we thought. Then with Vettel and Bottas being bottled up with each other, Raikkonen slowly gained on him and was with him at the end and took full advantage of Bottas and Vettel tripping over each other in terms of getting past Bottas anyway, and then held station to finish third. A solid double Ferrari podium from a weekend that was looking a bit drab for him, so I'm sure that I wanted the win this weekend, but a second and third, not to be sniffed at, helps him in the Constructors. So for that reason, Raikkonen out-qualified your teammate, did a great race as well to get back onto the back of Bottas and Vettel after having an additional pit stop, and yeah, a podium worthwhile. I think that was 5 podiums in a row now he's had, so that is decent. So for that reason, Raikkonen will be scoring 9 points. I think that was a solid drive by Raikkonen, and certainly well deserved. We come now to Daniel Ricciardo. After slipping down the order in qualifying and not making it through into the final qualifying, he ended up P13, I believe, and had a lot of work to do from there. Didn't get the strategy right with the tyres at all, on what tyre to be on at the right time in qualifying, and suffered heavily for it. So, there we go. I mean, we always thought that, yeah, maybe 6th would be the best he could get. Of course, they're a lot faster than the B teams, but not as fast as the cars ahead, so wouldn't really stand a chance, we thought. Verstappen retired early with problems, and then, of course, he had the contact with Bottas at the latter stages of the race, while Christian Horner was commentating, so he said, sake on the on live on Sky One, which I did make myself laugh at that, I must be honest. So yeah, don't speak to Christian Horner in future when these drivers are overtaking things. But yeah, Daniel Ricciardo then got boshed into the side of by Bottas, an ailing Bottas of course after the damage with Vettel, and just understeered straight into the side of him, caused floor damage, and then Mercedes told Bottas to let the Red Bull through. But that didn't happen. In the end, Ricciardo just got past him. You could see that Bottas was still putting up a fight. So Ricciardo, for me, another brilliant weekend by him. A great weekend. Unfortunate with the tyres, but that was more a team error, of course. I'm not too sure if he'd have decided what tyres he wanted to go on. But either way, he recovered well to finish P4, which is a fantastic anyway for a Red Bull to finish P4. So for that reason, it's going to be a full 10 points for Daniel Ricciardo. And it's his first 10 points of the season. He's had a couple of 12s, but first 10 points of the season, so well done to him. Valtteri Bottas finishing P5, and I am going to come down hard on him, I've got to be honest, because he did hit 2 cars in my eyes anyway. He certainly ploughed into one. I know it was damaged, but he knew it was damaged for quite a few laps. But to say about qualified P2, more than respectable. Was running around in second for quite a while. Ferrari elected to double stop Raikkonen, whereas Mercedes left Bottas out. And for me, people don't see it how I see it, I'm pretty sure they don't, but for me that was a team order, really, in terms of Bottas, you keep Vettel, the cork in the bottle behind you, we want him to stay behind so he's got no chance to attack Hamilton, and it showed, really, because Raikkonen made up a full pit stop on him. So Bottas, in my eyes, should have pitted because he could have then potentially attacked Vettel on fresher tyres. He'd have got out ahead of Raikkonen and Raikkonen wouldn't have been a threat to him at all. But yeah, I mean, it's strategy at the end of the day, but I think the strategy there was Mercedes kept Bottas out to help Hamilton. I've got nothing wrong with it, team orders are team orders, but for me, they could have had a double podium easily this weekend, whereas they chanced it and it didn't work. And it cost some points, it does cost them points. Ferrari tend to do team orders more in a sense of Kimi, let Vettel through, whereas Mercedes are more crafty in telling Bottas to hold position and not pit him. So for me, it was team orders, so I'm going to give him a little bit of sympathy for that. But in terms of ploughing into Vettel, I think it was his fault, but no harm done, really, only to his race. And then for ploughing into the side of Ricciardo, you knew you'd got understeer. You'd done 4 or 5 laps on the damaged wing before that happened. So, yeah, I'm not really going to favour you that much. So for that reason, I'm only going to score you 4 points. That's 2 points for your race and your qualifying. I'm going to combine it into there, and then 2 sympathy points for being left out there, but still not a brilliant result. Next up was Pierre Gasly finishing P6, and my driver of the day personally was given to Ricciardo, which is more than understandable. But for Pierre Gasly, finishing P6 after qualifying P6, did an amazing job. Only really benefited from the, of course, retirement of Verstappen, which naturally would have dropped him down a place when Ricciardo got through inevitably. But to keep Magnussen at bay by pretty much 10 seconds of the gap is a more than respectable effort, and that was amazing. It's like we saw earlier on in the season in Bahrain. I thought, yeah, they've got lucky with the qualifying being on the right tyres at the right time. in the race, maybe scrape a couple of points. But to finish 6th is a brilliant, brilliant achievement for that team and thoroughly deserved. So for that reason, Gasly, after a couple of tough races, it's going to be, of course, a full 12 points. 12 points on the board, you're getting more than 10 because that was a worthy, worthy drive. I don't care what anyone says, that was a brilliant performance by that car and that team and the driver. So, next up we have Kevin Magnussen. A solid race by Haas, 6 more points on the board for K-Mag, 7 for the team, of course, with Grosjean finishing 10th. And yeah, Magnussen qualified there, finished there, didn't do too badly really, did he? So yeah, I mean, sorry, he came from about 9th on the grid and then finished in 7th, so gained a couple of places as a result of the, of course, Verstappen retirement. But then all in all, just made a good effort by getting past the Renaults and, of course, Hartley and the other Toro Rosso. Worth noting that it was mainly due to strategy why K-Mag ended up there, because a lot of cars got caught by the cork in the bottle, which was Esteban Ocon. So he went out there for a long, long time trying to see if there was going to be a safety car to get a free pit stop. There wasn't in the end, but he was a cork in the bottle for a lot of drivers that made a pit stop, got stuck behind him, and in the end it meant that other drivers leapfrogged. That's why Grosjean slipped down in the end. He qualified 10th, was running behind his teammate. He made a stop a lap earlier than Magnussen and ended up costing him massively. In the end, lucky to scrape a point as a result of Van Dorn's late retirement. So for K-Mag, a brilliant weekend by you. Finishing 7th after qualifying 9th, more than respectable. And we've got some more points on the board for Haas, solid points as well. And everything's crucial for that P4 battle, as we all know. So for that reason, K-Mag, I'm going to score you 8 points. A brilliant drive. Next up is Fernando Alonso. One to benefit from the cork in the bottle Ocon. He managed to pit late, get out ahead of the cork in the bottle Ocon. I'm going to keep saying it because I like it. But yeah, Alonso benefited from it and did a brilliant, brilliant drive to finish P8 really in the end. He was running around 11th, so that he'd have probably got into the points anyway, but to finish 8th is more than respectable. Finally some points on the board for Alonso and the McLaren team after a little bit of a spell of shortness, and for Van Dorn a tale of what could have been really. We'll get to him later. But for Alonso to finish P8 on his birthday as well, so happy birthday Alonso. 37 today, bloody hell. Yeah, more than respectable result, and brilliant strategy by the McLaren boys to get him ahead. They could see what was going on and thought, we're not having none of that, we'll keep him out there, get a gap. And they did just that, and it worked really well for him. So Alonso, a brilliant weekend, and you're also going to have 8 points. So it's not really turning out to be that cruel at the moment, is it, this cruel wall? But I'm sure it'll get there. Who knows? To be fair, a lot of drivers did do fairly respectable. Next up was, of course, Carlos Sainz in the Renault. So what can we say about Sainz? Had a brilliant qualifying and slipped down at the start of the race, dropping down to P8 it was, and was battling around there for pretty much the entire race. Pit stops really, I don't think, favoured him too much. Ultra soft tyres onto the soft tyres while everyone else around him were on mediums, so that could have been a little bit of advantage for him. But to bring a couple of points home, qualifying 5th, so amazing effort by him, and in the end, like we said, finishing 9th, not the best result, only a couple of points for Renault, and those 2 points were the only points that Renault scored. So Sainz, after a great qualifying, you couldn't really deliver in the race. Unfortunately, didn't quite deliver, as we said. Tumbled down the order at the start and then pretty much stayed where he was. So 9th place, 2 points, deserved so much more this weekend. I'm sure Renault will be going home frustrated and into the winter break a little bit frustrated as well that they couldn't get more from this weekend. So Carlos Sainz, you will score just 5 points, a middle of the road 5. Great qualifying, but the race potential wasn't quite there. Picking up the final point, as mentioned, was Romain Grosjean scoring 1 solitary point. Looked to have the measure of his teammate, was pretty much matching him, were together on track for a little while. Unfortunately, Grosjean just pitted that 1 lap earlier, and it meant that Ocon, he got stuck behind him along with the other drivers that had pitted earlier as well, whereas Magnussen, via that 1 extra lap later, meant that he leapfrogged that battle and got out ahead of it and didn't get caught up in the traffic. He wouldn't have got points had it been for Van Dorn's retirement late on in the race, so he was lucky in that sense to pick up 1 point. He was frustrated over the radio, and yeah, he wondered why he was down in 11th, and they said, yeah, everyone just got caught up behind the Force India of Ocon, really, except for the McLaren boys, which stayed out longer. So Grosjean, not your best performance this weekend. Qualified 10th, finished 10th, so respectable. Didn't really get into any bother this weekend either, which is something new by Grosjean standards. So yeah, decent race. Not as good as your teammate, I'm aware of why. But I still think that Magnussen did have the measure on you because he was pretty much ahead all the time anyway. So not a bad effort by Grosjean, but not on par with his teammate. 6 points for him. As I say, I am aware of why he ended up only scraping 1 point, but you know, just a bit more pace from you. That's all I want, Grosjean. You're not really setting the world alight at the moment, it must be honest. Your drive's in doubt. Next up, P11, Brendan Hartley, and unfortunate to miss out on points, it must be said, after qualifying 8th, I think it was, so a decent effort by him. Both Toro Rossos into Q3, and for Hartley, yeah, it went well. And then he got stuck behind Ocon, and then 11th was really, I mean, it was just such a shame. It's such a tight circuit to overtake on. Hartley, my heart bleeds for you because you don't get any luck again. You get pitted earlier than your teammate, and it doesn't work out, and then it makes you look bad. And I don't think it was the case at all this weekend. He was on par with his teammate, if not matching him at times, and he did a solid job. Okay, he was out-qualified by a couple of places in terms of Gasly and Hartley, but to both get through into Q3 is a great effort on its own, so well done to Hartley. And as I say, unfortunate to miss out on points for getting caught up behind the cork in the bottle Ocon. So for that reason, Brendan Hartley, I'm going to score you a solid 8 points. 8 points. Next up, Nico Hülkenberg, and what can be said? Only one of the few to double stop after pitting again. I'm not quite sure what Renault were hoping after they pitted him twice, but he did get caught up in the cork in the bottle Ocon. And yeah, it made for a tough race for Renault, that did. It really did, because neither driver benefited. So Hülkenberg, a poor weekend this weekend really, but wasn't necessarily his fault. Was out-qualified by Sainz. Sainz delivered the qualifying result, he didn't. And unfortunate really for Hülkenberg. Points were definitely on the card prior to the pit stops. He was running around in 9th, I think it was, so would have been potential points there, but just couldn't get past Ocon, as could no one else really. So for that reason, Nico Hülkenberg, I'm going to score you the same as your teammate, 5 points. I know it's difficult to say, well, Sainz scored points, Hülkenberg didn't, blah blah blah, but in the end, it's just a difficult race to tell, especially getting caught up behind Ocon. So there we go, 2 middle-of-the-road 5s for Renault this weekend. I'm sure they'll be looking to deliver on in Spa, of course. Next up, Esteban Ocon. The cork in the bottle Ocon was running around in 10th for quite a long while of the race because he decided he wasn't going to pit. They were hoping for a safety car. It was really the only way that Ocon and Force India were going to score any points today. Both out in Q1, and of course neither of them really running around in the points much. It's never been a good circuit for Force India anyway, as we all know. Well, as I know anyway. They've only ever had 2 point positions there, never a top 6 finish. One in 2011 and one last year, 2 points finishes. That is it. So they never go well around here anyway, so I wasn't expecting much. Of course, we've got the talks to the administration and everything else, but that's not for here. And then we come to the race. They're out in Q1, 17th and 18th, and yeah, what could they really hope for? They benefited from the retirements ahead, of course, and some not really having a chance. Did well to battle around with the other drivers and teams, but 13th and 14th potentially was the best they could hope for. So for that reason, it wasn't a startling and stunning race, was it, by the pair of them? But for that reason, it's going to be Ocon with a solid 6 points and Perez with a solid 6 points as well. Because in the end, it was a good race in difficult circumstances for him. Of course, we know that Checo's not been paid and things like that. And as for Ocon and the Force India team itself, they're in administration. They're doing the best they can. Never go well around here anyway. So 13th and 14th, a solid enough drive for them. We're probably going to score a middle-of-the-road 5 each, but an extra bonus point each just because of the shit that's going on. So we hope it gets sorted soon. I say it's not for here, the administration thing, but my heart does give a little bit of sympathy out to them. So 6 points each. Next up is Marcus Ericsson. Did do a 1 stop, but very, very early on. I think it was only about lap 16, 17 he came in. A long way to go on the medium tyres after pitting on the ultra softs. The Sauber boys didn't have a good race at all. Charles Leclerc out on the first lap. I believe it was more mechanical now. I'm not confirmed that, but he had a bit of a bosh with the Force India sandwich at the start, which could have potentially damaged the suspension anyway. And yeah, we'll come to Leclerc anyway, but he was out. But Ericsson, he got mounted the side of Ricciardo, hit his rear wheel and front wheel, potentially damaging the car, pitted early for medium tyres, and didn't pit again, in the hopes that something could potentially happen in the race. They've got nothing to lose at that point. Sauber were already so far down the order, so Ericsson, poor race really by his standards, didn't qualify well either. So yeah, Ericsson through into Q2 where his teammate was out in Q1, but even so, he just didn't really deliver. Like I say, it was over before it really began, the race for Sauber this weekend. So unfortunate for Ericsson, so it's just going to be 4 points. 4 points for Ericsson. It couldn't really be anything more. They tried something, it didn't work, I get it, you know, but maybe just being a little bit more cautious on the first lap would have helped the Sauber drivers today. Next up is Sergei Sorokin and Lance Stroll. The last two finishers, 17 cars finished actually, quite surprising, considering the amount of contact at the end. I've seen out of wacky races, but Lance Stroll and Sergei Sorokin. Sergei Sorokin getting the measure of his teammate once again. Lance Stroll, worth noting, he did get through into Q2, which was a good effort, and then he ploughed it into the wall like a lemon and damaged his wing. And that meant that, of course, they didn't have the same spec wing as what they already had on in qualifying, because he's clearly broken them in previous races, and they've not been able to fix them. And, of course, then it meant that he had to start from the pit lane, so that wasn't brilliant for him. As for Sorokin, out in Q1, at the back, stayed at the back throughout the race, and, yeah, just got the measure of his teammate, really, the only car he finished ahead of. So, yeah, I don't know what to do. I'm probably going to do 1 point for Sorokin, because I do actually quite like Sorokin, but I just don't think I can be asked to give him any points. And Stroll can have minus 100, because I just can, because he annoys me. And of course, then we come to the retirement. So the first of the retirements on this list, the last in the race, of course, was Stoffel Van Dorn. After driving a solid race, benefiting from a brilliant McLaren strategy, unfortunately, gearbox issue, gearbox failure, saw him out of the race with just a few laps left, which would have been worthy points for him. He was running behind his teammate Alonso just only by a couple of seconds in 9th place, so would have scored a couple of points, the first in a long while, would have delivered a solid result, the first in a long while as well, and would have had the measure of his teammate, which again would have been first in a long while. I'm sure he'd be pleased with his performance this weekend, but not pleased that he couldn't bring home those points. It's been a while now. Of course, McLaren will be a little bit unhappy as well about the fact that he went out, because those 2 points could be crucial at the end of the season. So for that reason, Stoffel Van Dorn, my heart bleeds for you, it really does. You had a solid race this race. Qualifying was poor once again, but it was a difficult qualifying to judge. Could it have been strategy? Could it have been pace? It was always difficult to tell, really. So for that reason, Van Dorn, brilliant race. You know, you did a brilliant strategy. You know, McLaren performed well, but you had to perform well as well to jump the Ocon battle, which you did well. So for that reason, Stoffel Van Dorn, I'm going to award you 7 points. It's a solid weekend by you. Just a shame you couldn't deliver the couple of points. Next up, Max Verstappen, and well, what can we say about him? Qualified in a solid 5th place, really. That was about as good as he could get, of course. Didn't quite have the match that we expected them to have with Mercedes and Ferrari. It looked like the Red Bulls could challenge, but couldn't quite in the end because of the wet conditions in qualifying. Then in the race, running a solid enough 5th, was running behind, you know, the 2 Ferraris, a little bit gapped, but could have potentially made an impact on this weekend, and then he was out. It was an MG UK failure, which I believe was confirmed by Christian Horner. So, a weekend of what could have been, didn't really see what he was capable of, but did a solid enough performance anyway. So I'm going to score him 6 points, and that's middle of the road 5, plus 1 for being so unfortunate, because Red Bull just really haven't had the reliability lately, and it's such a shame to see. So, there we go. And of course, the one out at the start didn't really even do a lap. Technically, I don't think he even got classified as doing a lap. So, Charles Leclerc, what can we say? Was really struggling in the wet conditions and didn't really make the best of them. We saw him struggle in the wet conditions at Hockenheim as well, of course, and in qualifying couldn't capitalise either. Out in Q1 and out qualified by Ericsson. And then when it came to the race, whether it be as a result of the Force India sandwich that it was suffered at turn 1, or whether it was some kind of engine-related issue, in the end, he was out before the race even began, and Sauber's race was over before it began, really. So, for that reason, Charles Leclerc, I'm going to score him just a middle of the road 5, because I couldn't really judge him on the race today. It was dry, could have had the potential for climbing a few places. Points might have been a struggle, definitely, but if they'd have kept him out for long enough, it could have jumped Ocon, and that could have given him the points today. So there we go. So, as you can see, the results are in. We've scored them all, so now it's time to go and get Jolyon Palmer for Palmer of the Week. So bear with me 1 second, I'll just go get him. Jolyon, your time is here, Jolyon. Here he is, everyone. It's Jolyon Palmer for Palmer of the Week. And off Jolyon goes there, and he has awarded Valtteri Bottas a solid Palmer of the Week this week. And what can we say? Palmer style, really, wasn't it? Palmer had the habit of crashing on his own, but Bottas made the best of it this weekend and ploughed into the whole world, so did a good job of that. So solid effort by Palmer, scoring Bottas of the Week. And of course, just to reiterate for everyone for the rules, it's minus 10 points for Palmer of the Week for any of those that are wondering that are new to the channel. So minus 10 points there for Valtteri Bottas. So, that was the cruel wall for the Hungarian Grand Prix. As always, let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Did I score any too high, too low, too harsh, not harsh enough? You know how it goes now. And as always, like, comment and subscribe if you're new. And we'll see you for more cruel wall after the summer break. So, much love. Yes, this is a jester hat in Hungarian colours. I know it's not native to what Hungary is, but we've already used the 2 hats that are native to Hungary, would you believe? Doing some bit of research, so a bit of history lesson for you, because the cruel wall is always factual. We've already used the bowler hat, and we've already used the beret, which are actually originating from Hungary, would you believe? Farmers and shepherds used to wear them back in the 1800s or whatever it were, but the UK and France, of course, made them popular and traditional to their culture, although it was Hungary that invented them. So there we go, we've got a jester hat just for the tell after qualifying qualifying where the wet rain, sake. Yeah, so it looked that, sorry Mickey, got a script down here as well.